Verily, who, thank you, who is going to be giving the talk today. She herself is a scholar of Libyan Jews. She is doing a research project on them. She will explain more on that, I'm sure, as we continue. Her first master's is in, um, why am I blanking on it? Say it.
In urban planning.
Urban planning, sorry. And she says she now builds bridges between communities when originally she learned to build physical bridges. So enjoy that little bit and piece. And she has been doing our social media and our content. So for those who are not following us on social media, I strongly encourage it because after the talk today, you will see that there is a lot of scholarship behind all of it. So thank you all for joining. Continue to put comments and questions into the chat. I will be monitoring it. And I give the floor over to Dalya. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen now. And we'll begin. Okay, so as was briefly mentioned, I'm doing right now a thesis on Libyan Jews and their connection to Italy, and to the actually Italian Jewish community. Now, this is not me presenting my thesis. This is based on other people's research. My thesis actually begins in 1967, and as you see, we are going to be ending in 1967. But this, for today's talk, we're going to be talking about the Italian influence on the Libyan Jews when they were in Libya. And just to give some background, as was mentioned, part of my last name is Italian. I was not born into an Italian family. I'm half Ashkenazi, half Yemenite, but my husband's family is half Libyan, half Italian, hence the thesis topic, and today's talk. So before we begin, I want to just feel out the crowd a little bit, and I want to see if anyone has an idea. Let's start with why we're ending with 1967. You can put in the chat why you think we're ending our talk with 1967. If anyone has any ideas. The Six-Day War, Jews were expelled. So essentially, they were expelled. They were encouraged to leave. They said, we don't really have a way of protecting you here. And the Jews who remained, because most of them, as we'll see, left in 1949, 50, 51. The Jews who remained, around 5,000, left, and mainly to Italy. So if we're talking about Italian influence on Libyan Jews, like obviously there's going to be Italian influence if they're living in Italy. But so that's where we end. Let's go to a harder question. Does somebody know why we're starting with 1876? Now, these are clearly not the years of colonial rule. Libya was a colony of Italy, and this is a long period of time. So it's clearly not the beginning of colonial rule. Does anyone have any idea what happened in 1876? Let's see. Emancipation. You mean of Italy or Libya? Of the Jews. Oh, no, not quite. I'm gonna give another 10 seconds. Not a bad guess. I'll give you 10 seconds. So we're definitely gonna go into it, but 1876 was when the first Italian school, was when the first Italian school opened in Libya. That was not church owned, let's put it that way. And so that's why we begin there. And that's not the real beginning of Italian influence, but it's kind of more of the formal beginning. So let's get into it. First, let me give you some geographical context. I don't know if everyone is on the same page on this. Libya is in North Africa. It is one of the bigger countries. It has one of the smaller Jewish communities. It had, at its height, 35,000. And as you see, Tripoli and Benghazi are the two centers. And you can see that it's pretty close to Italy over here. And it's mostly settled in near the Mediterranean Sea. That's where all the settlements are. The rest is pretty arid. It's desert. Most people don't live there. And the Jews specifically lived in the area of Tripoli and the area of Benghazi, not just in those cities, also around them, in the villages, but that's where they were centered. So that's a bit of our geographical background. We have now some historical context. I'm not going to go through all of its history. It has a really, really long history going back to Greek times. There was centuries of Jewish presence there and also archaeological findings to match it. And there were changing ruling powers throughout the period that the Jews were there. Obviously, they were there before the Arabs. There were Romans there, the Spanish, Ottomans, Italians, British. I'm skipping over some, but after the British, independence. So that's generally changing ruling powers. And there were incoming populations, say in the 15th century, 16th century, Sephardi Jews came in seeking refuge. There were travelers always going through, because if you remember the map, we'll go back to the map, but if you're coming from Spain and going to the land of Israel by land, you're passing through Libya. So many rabbis passed through there too, also going in the other direction. There were coming and goings all the time. One of the main people associated with the religious traditions of Libya is Rabbi Shimon Levi, and he actually was a Sephardi rabbi coming from Fez on his way to Palestine and passed through Libya and saw that his co-religionists were sort of in anguish, and he decided to stay there and impart his wisdom, and he became sort of a symbol for the community. In this picture, I just always have to mention him because I think he doesn't get mentioned enough, and I don't think even enough Libyan Jews know about him. This is Mordechai Cohen, and he wrote a book in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, called Higid Mordechai, which basically is a historical book of from ancient times to 1912. He lived longer than 1912, but he ended his history when the Italians came in. And he was a very important figure for that reason. A lot of researchers use his book today because it is invaluable in keeping the traditions, the history, the customs, the language, the names, everything is in there of the Libyan community. So that's about the history. Now, before we get into the Italians, I'm just going to give a little bit. The Ottoman period was very long before the Italians, and I'm not talking about them, but they definitely did have influence, and definitely in 1876, the Ottomans were still ruling, even though we're talking about Italian influence during that time. So the Ottomans were in Libya in the 19th century. In 1835, like they were there from before, then there was another ruling power that took over. In 1835, they reasserted their power, the Ottomans. And then in 1856, there were Tanzimat reforms. I'm not going to get too much into it, but it's something that happened throughout the Ottoman Empire, and it changed the status of the Jews. The jizya tax was removed. They didn't have clothing restrictions, and their rabbinic courts only could really deal with personal stuff. They couldn't do anything beyond that. The rest was going through the public courts. Now, this is important because this is what the Jews were experiencing at that time. And also they were being sent rabbis from the Ottoman Empire. So as we go into Italian influence, remember that there are also Ottoman rabbis coming in at this time and are supposed to bring in their form of modernization, the Ottoman form of modernization, while the Italians will soon see bring their own. So Now, for the Italians. Even before 1876, there was always a connection between Libya and Italy. As you see, they're very close to each other. And mainly the connection was with Livorno. And Livorno is a port city, Tripoli is a port city, Benghazi is a port city. So essentially they were doing trade. That was their main connection. They also, at least in Tripoli, were using Livorno a lot for religious reasons. They some of them sent students to yeshivot in Livorno. And some of the rabbis from Livorno were sent to Tripoli. And before there was a Hebrew publishing house in Libya, they sent their books to be published in Livorno. So there was constant connection, constant talk between the two. And that's kind of where 1876 comes in. So 1876 is this year that I set as the beginning of our talk. And as I said, it's the year that an Italian school was built. Now, for some, now we have the context of the connection from before, right? I said that they were sending students to Livorno, rabbis were being sent from Livorno. And actually in 1875, the community in Tripoli sent it to Livorno asking for a teacher. They wanted to open a school. And so Livorno sent a teacher, Gianetto Paggi, to Tripoli. And he opened the first only boys' school that was not under church rule. And it became a phenomenon. What do I mean? The following year, in 1877, a girls' school was opened by also another Livornese Jew, Carolina Nunes Weiss. And that actually was the only girls' secular school for in Libya. And from then on, things kind of really took off. The Italian educational system at Libya was all of a sudden they connected the education system to the state system in Italy. So the Italian Foreign Ministry of Foreign Affairs decided in 1882 that they were going to take over the schools that these Jews had opened with their Jewish teachers, and they were going to convert them into Italian state-run schools. They also established other ones based on this, and Gianetto Paggi actually was made the director of all the schools, all the Italian state-run schools that were being opened in Libya throughout, also in Benghazi. The Italian authorities sent teaching staff and material. They provided the proper accommodations. And even though at the beginning the schools were tuition-based, in 1885, the Italian authorities made it free. They provided textbooks, shoes, coats for the poor students in the winter. And it really, like I said, became a phenomenon. Now, why were they doing this? Essentially, they knew that they wanted to get into Libya, and the schools was a great way to start dropping little, not just feelers, but also getting people to support Italy more and more. And they realized that what the Jews had started here was a great way for them to start this process if they ever want to take over. So we have this entire school system that started in 1876. And yes, mainly there were Jews studying in these Italian schools. There were a few Muslims and some Christians. A lot of the Christians were still going to church-operated schools. But these were the only Italian schools in Libya until colonization. And it all started with the Jewish connection to Livorno. Now, Jews were also involved beyond, and I'm just going to remind you that we're talking about before colonization, okay? So we're talking at the end of the 19th century. Now, Jews were also involved in disseminating Italian culture in other ways. Before 1911, before that, the colonization, they were involved with the banks. Italy was sending banks to Libya, Banco di Roma. The social clubs were through the Jews, the cultural institutions, the newspapers, everything was through the Jews. So let me just try and break it down for you. In 1880, Eugenio Arbib was a notable Jew in the Tripoli community, established a club where the most influential members of European society, particularly Italian, would meet. Among those Jews were people who were obviously involved in other ventures. And some of those other ventures were the Società Dante Alighieri. Okay, and that was a cultural institution founded in 1889 with Paggi, who was our education guy. It had the aim, it was a general institution with the aim of preserving and spreading the Italian language and culture in the world. Okay, so we're not talking about something specifically Jewish, we're talking about Italian, and these are mainly Libyan Jews who don't necessarily have Italian citizenship. I will note that at this point in time, there were Italian citizen holding Jews living in Libya around 1100, but a lot of the wealthy members of at least the Tripoli community were not Italian citizens, but were very involved with Italian culture. And as we mentioned, there was also the banks, Banco di Roma, which opened in 1907 in Tripoli and 1909 in Benghazi. 12 of the 12 counselors, 7 were Jews. There's actually a funny story, like they tried to open the banks on Saturdays, and they just couldn't because too many of the workers were Jewish. I was looking for a story because I remember reading it somewhere and I can't remember where. So if somebody knows it and wants to put it in the chat, that would be great. But there's some story about them trying to open on Saturday, and then some really important machine went awry and they realized, okay, there's a reason we're not opening on Saturdays. The Jews have something. So the last piece of this dissemination of Italian culture that I didn't mention yet was the newspapers. Now, the Jews were the first ones to bring Latin script printing press to Tripoli. In 1909, they published the first Italian Il Giornale di Tripoli. In later that year, they opened another one, L'Eco di Tripoli. They also published 2 others, but all the time it was Italian. It wasn't supposed to be a Jewish newspaper in any way. It was supposed to be Italian. Through these newspapers, of course, the Italian authorities again realized that this was a blessing, and they also supported them financially. They said, "You're doing these projects for us. Thank you." Now, it sounds like they're really Italian. And I should mention, there's a difference between the wealthier class and the poorer class. The wealthier class were not always a major part of the population, but obviously had great influence, as we mentioned. So yes, the poor classes, especially people in the villages, they were not necessarily as involved in Italian culture. But even those who were, Renzo De Felice is the first one to write a book on modern Libyan history, Libyan Jewish history. And as you see, he's Italian, he wrote it in Italian. He was sort of commissioned by the Libyan community that had arrived in Italy. And he wrote, even the richer, more cultured and modern Libyan Jews had much more in common with the Libyan Jewish mass than with metropolitan Jews, meaning the Italian Jews. As I said, there were also Italian Jews living there. They dressed like Europeans, adopted Italian culture, sent their children to Italian schools, lived outside the Hara, the Jewish quarter, mixed in colonial high society, and practiced a religion short of the originally Arab superstitions common among more traditional and unlettered Jews. Despite all this, they remained Libyans, psychologically and morally linked to local traditions and expressions. Now, I bring this quote to show how Italian they were. I mean, he's praising them for being very, very Italian and all those things. But they were still Libyan. They were still very rooted in where they were. And he actually continues from there to say that what separated them from Western European Jews was that they continued to hold on to tradition and religious education. And that is something that comes up later. We'll see it during colonial times. But that maybe to him is what makes them remain Libyan psychologically and morally. But he admits they were very Italian. They tried to be very Italian. Now comes our actual period of colonization, 1911 to 1943. This is when they conquered Tripoli. Much later, they conquered Benghazi and the inlands. It was a process, and we'll talk about it a little bit. But before we get into this process, I want to bring to you another quote, because this sort of sums up what happened, and now the stage that we're going into with the colonization. From Rachel Simon is also a researcher of Libyan Jews. And she writes, from the late 19th century, under Ottoman rule, Jews were involved in advancing Italian culture and ideology in Libya, as well as Italy's economic and political goals. As we saw, Jews did not initiate the Italian occupation of Libya, but they did help to advance several early aspects of Italy's peaceful penetration of Libya. Most of them did not oppose the conquest, and some even assisted it. So how the Jews felt exactly with colonization, we know from some hints from her, from other people. We don't know enough, but what we do know is that, like she said, they helped trickle in Italian culture, making for maybe an easier process in transition from Ottoman times to Italian times. Now, new rule also meant that there was new status, and many of the wealthier Jews did welcome this new rule for that reason. They appreciated bringing European influence and culture in general, because now it was more official when colonization happened. And in parallel, the Muslims were not so into a Western power coming in. Remember, the Jews, yes,
Dahlia, you're frozen if you hear me. Okay. Right? Yeah, we're still frozen. Sorry, I apologize. Technology is great until it isn't. We know this. I'll give her a minute. Let's see. Nope, you're still frozen. No, we may have to go out and, nope, we lost her. I apologize. Oh, this happens. It happens. Give it a minute. Everything's fine. I don't know. Our electricity fell earlier today, but if yeah, I can tell a story in the meantime because Evelyn shared her story, so thank you. Is it okay if I read it out? So Evelyn said, because of the mass exodus during and straight after the Six-Day War, I was in Tripoli and hidden in my home for 17 days until I was able to leave with my 2-year-old twins. My husband left 10 days later for London, where we had a home. So we see this. And what year was that, Eveline? Oh, no, you're on mute. Sorry.
I married in London. I went to live in Tripoli from 64 to 67.
Ah, so that's very, because your husband is from there.
That's right.
Thank you for sharing. It looks like Dahlia lost electricity completely. You're on mute.
Yes, we lost electricity, which is great timing. The entire building, I don't know if it's the whole block. It looks like it. But that's what we have hotspot for, right?
Yeah. Do you
Maybe
want to send me the PowerPoint?
um let's see if I can do it this way.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.
Um
That's okay. You can leave it like this. Right? Everybody can understand that this is
no,
perfect. You think you can do it?
just a moment.
Okay. Thank you
Uh,
all for your patience. It does happen.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Uh,
Okay. Oh, we don't see the presentation mode.
yeah. Okay. Just a moment. Sorry. Wait for it. Um,
Thank you, Huba, for your encouragement.
Sorry.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's nice.
Okay. Okay. We're gonna make it work. Where are we? Okay.
We will make it work.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Beautiful.
So let's go back a little. Nope. We're in the wrong direction. Okay.
Beautiful.
Okay. So, um, okay, so this is the support that the Jews gave to the colonial powers. And basically, I want to just like introduce the colonial times in this way, because this is how Hikid Mordechai, as I mentioned, Mordechai Cohen, introduces the colonial powers. He says it's the conquering of the land of Libya for the second time by Rome as in ancient times. So he sort of sees this as a connection of Romans who were ruling in Libya from before. He likes making connections between the histories. The Jews who were living there, I don't think necessarily were feeling that. It was centuries before, but this is how colonial time starts. They, in 1911, approach Tripoli, and then, as you can imagine, 1911, that should ring a bell, World War I. Things get a little bit complicated. Uh, they conquered, not then there are Arab revolts all around in the villages. There are Arab revolts in Benghazi. So they enter the war in 1914, so they can't really take over fully. Good thing that they have all these cultural institutions in place, at least to help with that process. But it's not till like 1932 that they really fully get a grasp of all of Libya. Uh, During World War I, like we said, they couldn't really fight. And after World War I, they start to get it back because they now have troops that they can send there too. Now, I put here an image. This is not an Italian newspaper. It's a newspaper from Argentina, actually, but I liked how they framed it, the war of the Italians and the Turks. Now, why is it a war between the Italian and the Turks? Yes, they took it from the Ottomans, but after they took it from the Ottomans, the local Arabs were fighting the Italians. So why is it considered the Turks? Because Turks and Germans were on the side of the Libyan Muslims, and they were trying to help them regain their territory. That happened during World War I. At the end of World War I, the Germans and the Turks were out, and the Arabs were left to themselves. Italy had more troops to use, so that's how they were able to gain back, because the Arabs also didn't have their allies. Now, it's important to note that during this time, the Jews were in this in-between state. They weren't here nor there. It kind of helped them once colonization took full effect, because they were sort of seen as this in-between. They weren't part of the Arab revolts. They weren't fully Italian, but some of them were. So there were still, I don't know if they're full-on pogroms, but there were definitely attacks on Jews in the villages because they were seen as Italian friendly, even though, as we said, in the villages, they were less Italian friendly. So there was just this sort of environment of the outsider, even though the Jews had been living there for centuries. So with colonization, we said 1922, 1930s, we get fascism. And now things start to turn. The Jews were like, okay, we were on your side, we helped you. And now they're being forced to open their shops on Shabbat. They have to attend schools on Saturdays. Rabbis are being sent and chosen for them. They're not allowed to choose by themselves. And it didn't totally crush them, but it did feel like an attack on them. Now, this is sort of where the Italian Jewish community comes in, because to the Italians, this doesn't seem like such a big deal, because Italian Jews, and I'm speaking mainly in Rome because now the center is in Rome, the Italian Jews had been opening their shops on Shabbat. They attended school on Saturdays. It wasn't a problem for the Italian Jews. And so when the Libyan Jews also turned to the Italian Jews, asking them for help, they had to initiate, they had to, I wouldn't say beg, but they really had to make their case, because that wasn't, that they didn't understand this traditionalism that the Libyan Jews had kept. So this also leads to a rift between the rabbis that were being sent. The Libyan Jews, like I said, had been sent rabbis before from the Ottoman Empire, so they knew what ruling power sending them rabbis was like. But here, it seemed like it was a little bit harder to connect the masses to the rabbis. The rabbis were coming in also in the environment that I mentioned, a little bit more open Judaism, as opposed to the conservative, meaning like conservative as in Orthodox, as in like keeping to tradition, Judaism of the Libyans. And also they were coming in under the auspices of Italian authorities. They were supposed to be bringing with them modernity. They weren't just supposed to be coming to be religious leaders. And this caused a lot of rift between the rabbis, and the Libyan Jews a lot of times they respected them as scholars, but they definitely didn't respect them as their community leaders, because they just said they don't really understand us. Now, before I get to that, I'm just gonna give one example. The case of Shabbat, sorry, let's start with the case of Kiddushin. There was a case where this younger woman was married to an older man, and now I'm going to say the Italian authorities. When I say Italian authorities, I'll say Italo Balbo, who was the governor of Tripoli at that time. So he said this marriage is annulled. You gotta you can't have somebody so young marrying somebody so old. Now, the rabbinic courts in Libya had upheld the marriage, and there was an Italian rabbi at that time, Rabbi Gustavo Bolognesi, and he was told by Balbo, you have to annul the marriage, it's not an option. And this was the one rabbi who said, I can't annul it. This is what the community has asserted. This is how they practice. and he was sent back to Italy. He was sent back by Balbo to Italy because he, I don't know, felt connected to the Libyan community, and he wasn't bringing enough modernity according to them. So with fascism, obviously, we have our racial laws. Now, in Libya, they came a little bit later than in Italy. They were hearing about what was happening in Italy, but Balbo was pretty intent on not having them come so soon to Libya or at all because he knew that the Jews were really important for the economy of Libya. And if you're now restricting them by not allowing them to go to schools or take part in certain civic institutions, then things are going to start to fall apart. So he, Bayalat is remembered as the good one because he helped push off these things. He did it, I don't know if self-interest or other interest, but he did it because he wanted the economy to keep flowing. And these racial laws wouldn't allow that. In the end, he also had to give in, and the racial laws arrived to Libya. And then we have the Holocaust. Italy enters the war. I'm not going to get too much into it, but Libya was one of the countries in North Africa that was hit the hardest by the Holocaust. And it was the Holocaust because, let's say, British Jews who were living in, all the British citizens actually, who were living in Libya were sent out. A lot of them, also French, were sent out. There were Jews who were living in Libya who made it to Bergen-Belsen. This picture is some of the Jews who survived and made it back. There was the Jado camp in Libya where hundreds were sent to. It was a working camp, a concentration camp, depends on how you want to declare it. I'm not going to get too much into it. There's definitely research on that. But because we're in this period, I have to just mention the Holocaust and how it affected also the Jews in Libya. Now, if you remember, our time frame for colonization is 1911 to 1943. We start with the World War I and we're ending in World War II. Italy is losing, so the British and the French start splitting things up. Libya is one of them. And so now the British take over. I don't know if okay. The British take over and you think a new era is beginning, but it's a mixed era. In 1945, there's a pogrom. Vivian mentioned there are testimonies from that pogrom that sound really disgustingly similar to October 7th, 2023. Then by 1948, when there's another pogrom, the Jews already fight back. In 1950, Italy is obliged to renounce colonial claims altogether, but that doesn't mean that Italy doesn't remain there. The teachers still stay. There are coffee shops. There are social clubs. So it seems like it's a new era, but there's still Italian influence there. 1949 to 1952, following the declaration of the State of Israel, 30,000 out of, this is approximate numbers, out of 36,000 Jews in Libya moved to Israel, maybe also onwards to other places. And in there, 1951 is Libyan independence. So these are changes taking place. The Italians are technically out, but we'll see that they're still in as we so during this period of the 1950s until we get to 1967, the Italians are still being felt. There are still Italians living there, and the Jews are still sending their schools to their students to Jewish schools. They're speaking Italian at home. They're involved in all the social curriculars of Italians, and they don't lose that connection. Yes, they have some relatives that may have gone to Italy, and they remain connected to them through that. Basically, the Italians are not out. And one of the the recent researchers, Pierre Rosetto, um, did a bunch of interviews, and she said this wasn't the point of her research, but what she found was that a lot of her interviewees, Libyan born, talk about Italianness. Uh, and this is from a time when there were supposed to be no Italians, but her quote for her article even is, "We are all Italian," was somebody who was born in Libya, declared that when they were there, they were all Italian, even though they did not hold Italian citizenship. Now, she sums up these different time periods and the difference in how they felt connected to Italy in this quote. "The sense of Italianness expressed by Jews born in Libya between the 1920s and the 1950s takes on different connotations across time. On the one hand, the recollections by Jews born between the 1920s and 30s revolve around the idea of Italians as the bearers of modernity, development, and education. That's what they were a part of, bringing all of this to Libya. On the other side, recollections by the younger generations from, say, the 1940s and 50s, who lived in the independent kingdom of Libya, hint to a deeper and more personal involvement in and with Italianness, including closer social relationships with Italians, Italian language and material practices," meaning the ones who were born in the 1920s and 30s felt this like Italianness as bringing something great to their country, something cool, something advanced. But the younger generations were just Italian. Like they just felt it in them that they were Italian. And uh, this makes sense because also during this period, during the 50s and 60s, like we said, in the 40s, we see pogroms. We see that they're more distance, more cautious of the connection with the Muslims, and they have this Italian identity to hold on to, and they're deeply involved in it. Anything that remains that is Italian is still connected to the Jews as it was before. And then no, there was a slide that said 1967 and 1967. Um, I'll just say briefly another set of pogroms, and King Idris essentially said to the Jews, "I cannot protect you, so if you want, you can leave." And of the 5,000 or so that remained, almost all left, maybe not in 1967, a few hundred remained after 1967, but by 1980s, there were maybe 10 Jews left. In 2003, the last Jew living in Libya left. But the reason I end my talk with 1967 is because most of the Jews moved to Italy. They didn't necessarily all remain there. If, let's say, 5,000 got there, maybe 2,000 remained, 1,500, between 1,500 and 2,000 remained. But that's where a whole new story begins in their connection to Italy. But it started, for me at least, in 1876. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I encourage everybody to open your cameras.
I'm going to try to give you some light of me because I'm sorry.
Yeah, but that's okay. We really appreciate, oh, that's even nicer.
I
But
don't know if it's nice or not, but whatever. We have an outage for the next 2 hours, so I have no other option.
oh, wow. Well, then I think it's very impressive that you just continued. So I have to say. So please do put some questions or comments in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I'm happy to um, direct them there. I know that we have a few people here who did leave Libya in 1967. So those are, if some of you want to add in as well, we're very happy to. So the first question is if you have names of some of the rabbis that served in Libya who came from Italy.
So the two that I have off the top of my head is Castel Bolognesi, who I mentioned. I can write it out, and Rabbi Aldulates, who was in the later part of the colonial period, and he tried to convince them that the Jews were very loyal and that they shouldn't be discriminated against. The ones before, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I can definitely find them.
Okay. I mean, if you'd like, we can send it in a follow-up email. Let me know. So another question is, oh, is that another one? Dario Deseni?
It's possible I don't remember, but
Any of our
definitely
Libyans here can chime in as well. Okay, so first, another question is, yes, we did address that there are no Jews left in Libya today, but the question is, are there any historical, you said 2003 with the last one left?
Mhm.
And the question is if there are any historical Jewish sites operating in Libya.
There are none operating. The Jewish cemeteries were largely destroyed, and that was part of an ongoing struggle after they left. And there's one synagogue that there's a picture of in ruins that somebody tried to re refurbish and was chased by a mob and nearly killed. So, no, there are no operating Jewish sites in Libya.
Do we know if Daniel, was that his name? The one who went to all the countries in the world, did he take pictures in Libya?
He tried. Oh,
Oh, electricity, very exciting.
yeah. Um, he he did try. He was standing um, a couple of 100 meters away trying to take a picture, and somebody walked over to him and told him to erase it. So, yeah.
So there we go. But so there are some remnants of something, but we have no. Okay, this is an interesting question. Was there a relationship with the Jews of Tunisia? I don't know if you know this. I don't know.
That's a great question. I can't say Tunisia at large, but I can say Jerba. They're very close. Tripoli and Jerba are very close geographically. And I don't remember if it was in the 17th or 18th century. The Jews of Tripoli left Tripoli because of some attacks and went to Jerba, and they were also, and then came back from Jerba. So they have a lot of influence also from there, at least the Jews from Tripoli. That's the connection to Jerba. Yeah.
Thank you. And Patricia, you have to unmute.
Yeah, I have an observation here. There was something that we never understood, why my mother had Tunisian passport instead of Libyan passport. So maybe this is the reason. And we never had that answer while she was alive.
Thank you. And now this is a kind of funny question because it's a little ironic asking you this. Are there records of the Libyan Jewish community in Italy? Besides for those people here on the Zoom that came from Libya to Italy, but is there any record of it?
What do you mean by records? The question is,
My head went to your thesis, but you can tell us what you think.
so I'm going to interpret the question in a couple of ways, unless
Yechezkel, if you want to open your mic and clarify the question, that's okay.
I was just wondering, like, are there did the records go with them to Italy, like synagogue records, records of families, things like that?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have a definite answer for that. I can tell you that their initial leaving in 1967 was with very little. There were definitely heads of houses that went back and tried to gain things. I don't know if synagogue records, communal records were part of them. So I don't have a good enough answer for that. There are definitely records of things in the book Higid Mordechai that I mentioned. communal records that he copied over from decades prior, but that's not from the early 20th century, that's from the early 19th century.
Evelyn, do you know something about that?
I don't know a great deal. I don't know, I haven't got the knowledge of your wonderful speak. I want to say how much I'm enjoying this, but when we first went to Israel a few years after leaving in 67, because there could be very little contact with my husband's family and the family in Israel, we went to the Bet Hatfutsot, which I know since has been tremendously updated. And my husband was deeply moved by the amount of newsreels and videos. I mean, now everything's so much more modern. And his late father was one of the people that helped stamp the passports when people went to Israel in 1948 with the shlichim that came from Israel. And my late husband said, this is the greatest tribute to somebody and to a whole group of people that aren't here anymore. So I don't know about records and things. I can't imagine it's like in London where you have so much, records in the community and everything. But the newsreels and the videos in Israel are something very, very special. Just wanted to add that comment.
Thank you. Jacob? Jacob, you're on mute. So,
First of all, about records, you may check in Milan the CTEC, CDEC, called CEDEC, and there are a few synagogues, Libyan synagogues in Rome, and they do have the records. As well, the Jewish community in Rome has records. You have just to look for.
sorry, the records that they brought with them from Libya?
The families, of course. Individual families, they have it, no doubt. All people from Muslim country brought with them their records. Not necessarily all, but certainly enough to create a story. However, as in regard to the citizenship, it is very common in Muslim country that Jews try to have a European citizenship. That is very common. It is a way also for them to be protected, and so that is not strange, and it's not strange that Jews were denied an Arab citizenship. Most of them they did not have, maybe the poor. As well, in regard to Jerba, I visited just recently in March, and they do have a lot of stories about Jews coming from Libya, and they have a synagogue, founded by Libyan Jews. As well, here you have Livorno. Yes, Livorno you have some Jews from Libya, but it's not the major center. The major center is Rome, followed by Milan. Yeah, there are a few, certainly. I think the president of the congregation in Livorno is a Libyan or Egyptian, I'm not sure. But anyway, one thing very important has not been mentioned is financial and finances Jews played in Libya. By the time they left, it seems, so I heard directly from people coming out of, like the Maher coming out of Libya, they say we had in our hand 60-70% of the finances in Libya when we left. It's not by chance that Jews Libyan Jews in Rome, they have many shops in Corso, the main Corso, the main avenue in Rome. You need to have a lot of money to establish such shops, okay, and so
Thank
forth.
you. I'm gonna make sure because we're going over time. I
Okay,
definitely appreciate it, and I know that it
enjoy.
helps to add. And actually, we know there are some people here that went from Libya through Rome and then continued on or stayed in Rome. So thank you all, and thank you for those who are sharing in the comments as well. If you want to hear more, if you want to hear some others, please do reach out. You'll get a follow-up email to this um, with a link to the recording and as well as our upcoming program. So I look forward to seeing you next week when we talk about Thanksgiving, and I look forward to your feedback and your interest. Thank you. If you want to stay on for a minute, I know that Rachel had a question, so it's up to those who want, but thank you all for coming, those who didn't. Dalya, do you want to give a minute to talk about the Libyans in Israel?
I wish I knew as much. I do know that in the research they mentioned that the connection to Libya was stronger for those who came to Italy than for those who came to Israel, probably because of the social environment of Israel at the time and being Jewish, again, a minority in Italy. I don't know as much of the impact. Some of what was mentioned can be expanded upon, but like I said, I ended in 1967, so I don't want to get too much into what they did after. We can maybe have a follow-up talk about it, but Israel is not as much my field, so I don't know. I can't throw out names of politicians or people who did things of Libyan heritage in Israel.
I was also
There-
wondering if the establishment of Israel had a particular impact on the people in Libya, given that they were more Italy oriented and all, but still, was that something that you have come across anything?
Well, there were already Zionistic circles going on in Libya. The Italians tried to suppress them at certain points because they didn't want to anger the Muslims. But so there was Zionistic activity going on before. And there were also young boys being sent to Israel ahead of their families before that. So there was definitely a connection. In terms of the populations that went and those that stayed, in general, what's said is that the poorer populations went after 1948, and the ones who really had a lot to lose stayed. That's a generalization. But the ones who had a lot to lose were also the ones who were most connected to Italy. So
Thank you, and thank you
Okay.
all. I see
Thank you.
people are exchanging emails. This is exciting, and thank you all for coming, and thank you so much, Dalya. I learned a lot, so thank you.
thank you, everyone.
Have a great rest of your day wherever you are.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Chodesh Tov.
Chodesh Tov.